Said our hustle's work is never through. We making it 'cause we making moves. The only thing we know how to do. Said it's the only thing we know how to do. Work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard. We work hard, play hard, keep partying like it's your job. Work hard, play hard, work hard, play hard. We work hard, play hard, keep partying like it's your job.
It's before the hour of 10. You've been listening to Tune Dishing Out right here on Breakfast Show this Thursday morning. How to make sure you get a hang of the day. When we were on the news this morning, if you followed the news, part of that conversation was about the increase in fuel pump price and how that officially has also affected vegetable oil sales, if you followed our business news. And that somehow it's a conversation that would have another day. But on the other side of that conversation, it's how Enugu is experiencing, and do I call it an influx of cars, or should I say traffic? But you also do know, earlier before the traffic, there's been a series of announcements and put out that some parts of the metropolis or the road would be going under construction. So with that said, you will need to start looking out for alternate routes to get to where you're going. And typically, if you would leave your house and get to where you're going in an hour, so it would also make sense if you begin to change the time that you would normally use to get out of the house and get to where you are going. With that said, if you're stepping out of your house this morning and you need to be somewhere at 12, this would be a good time to leave the house. You'll be like, it's Enugu now. Well, it's Enugu, I know, but some parts of the road, major roads around town, has been cut out and undergoing construction or repairs. So you will need to get out on time and find alternate route to where you're going. Good thing, Enugu has a lot of linkages, streets, linkages they call them, within the streets that you could take, and they're very hard that you could explore. So also a good time for you to explore other parts of town. Also, while you're doing that, be cautious. Because we're saying explore the streets, you might see a very lonely path and you felt, this could be a very good way to delve into. Here is your case. Please do not try danger. My name is Kenne Odigwe, and 2 days ago, Enugu, Nigeria, the world joined to celebrate World Pneumonia Day. And as part of creating awareness around pneumonia and bringing that conversation to the table, in the studio we are joined by Dr. Obinna Nduagubam, a consultant pediatrician from ESUT Teaching Hospital, ParkLane Enugu. Last year we had this conversation, and this year he is back again. And part of that conversation we're having, like I said in the beginning, is raising awareness and making sure we have the conversation, or rather start the conversation. A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
I remember last year when we had that conversation, it was a shocker, because I remember at the end of that conversation, everyone in the studio was so shocked to speak or to even act. There were a lot of almost scary, because everyone gets it. It's something people get out like, what's wrong with you? Like, I just had pneumonia, and people would say, gakemikse lugogo and all of that. And not really, jokes apart. And with the figures you dropped last year, it shook us all. But for the sake of having that conversation and making sure that everyone who wasn't here last year or who's just joining to have that conversation get a hang of what we are talking about. What exactly is pneumonia? Pneumonia, and as we call it, pneumonia, and what it means, especially from our outtakes from last year's conversation.
Okay, thank you very much, Kenneth, for having me, and good morning once more, our listeners. Well, pneumonia from the word simply means inflammation or infection involving the air sacs, what we call the lungs. Pneumo is a Latin word that means air or lungs. Okay, onia refers to condition. Okay, so it's simply a condition of the lungs or the air sacs. So whenever the air sacs are infected or inflamed, be it due to organisms, bacteria, viruses, or fungal organisms, okay, a person is said to have a pneumonia. It can involve one or both of the air sacs at a given time. So that's simply what pneumonia is, and it's still a major issue in our environment. Now, from what we had last year and now, not much has changed. If rather when you look at it over a 5-year period, you can observe some significant change. Okay, so as at 2018-2019, world over pneumonia was on top, was even ahead of malaria as a killer globally. Okay, but currently, particularly in developing parts of the world, malaria is ahead. Okay, which in Nigeria, malaria accounts for about 30% of under 5 mortality. Pneumonia giving about 20%. So the distant second or third. Okay, so in as much as we may not have made so much progress in terms of infrastructure, in terms of other sectors that should help in the fight against the scourge, pneumonia, there seems to be some trickle down of our statistics, but we are still very far from what we should have as a country. The number of deaths we still have, where we have close to 95% of the deaths from pneumonia occurring in the developing world, for which Nigeria alone is accounting for about 30% of those deaths. Over 130,000 deaths under 5 children still occur due to pneumonia in Nigeria. And those statistics, those figures are not good enough. And we can do a lot to improve them. And that is part of the reasons why we're here. And we thank Radio Nigeria for that opportunity.
Jerry, like I said in my introduction, people would laugh and say, oh, it's something. And for children, a lot of things are overlooked. People don't really get the whole picture. And when we call 10%, 20%, I used to argue that we call them cases and percentages because we are trying to shy away from giving it a human face. We are talking about 200 million, 30 million, and these millions we're talking about number of people who've died. Is there a way we could humanize that more? That everyone, I believe in preventive as being proactive, preventive as against running, being reactionary. How do we get to the point where we become proactive and not reactionary?
Well, thank you very much again. That's a very big question. In fact, that's a very big topic that can take us hours to look at. But I'll look at it from different angles. One is that as a nation, we're still joking. Let me use that word, joking, when it comes to what we approve or what we provide for health. Okay, a country that is still running single-digit budgets for health. It just shows where we are in terms of our level of seriousness when it comes to health. A situation where we have our national health insurance policy on paper, beautiful policies, but the level of implementation is not far from being good enough, where we cannot rake in every person's compulsorily. It's been made compulsory, yes. Health insurance is compulsory, but in its implementation it's not. A situation where anybody above 18 years should be able to contribute to the health insurance program, even if it's a woman that is marketing vegetables in the market, should be able to contribute, be it 100 naira or 20 or 50 naira, 100 or 200 naira every month as part of our contribution to the health insurance package. That will pool a reasonable amount of funds that persons that are in need will be able to access. And with that, of course, everybody wouldn't fall ill at the same time. Okay? But that will take care of the poorest of the poor in our environment.
But you also do know why people do not agree to contribute to, for instance, health insurance schemes. when you do at the end of the day. Like the idea is that once you are a civil servant, the money is deducted from source. And for us in federal establishments, when you are being onboarded onto the system, you get to fill out forms and choose a hospital and all of that. Now, when you go to these hospitals, especially when it's a case of care, first thing first, they would prefer to take on paying clients, cash to clients, as against NIH, has clients. And then when the treatment comes, they might want to give paracetamol to A before they want to give to B. And then they will tell you, oh, we can only give you medication A. We can't do B because it is not covered. And some other time they will tell you they don't even have it. But you'll be there and they will give it to some other person. So, question is, why do you need to contribute to something that you can access, especially when you needed it the most?
Okay, thank you very much. Very, very important question. Part of the reason is still in the implementation. All these things are there in the package. The problem is the implementation. Now, the quantity or the access you can have in health insurance has a relationship with the quantity of funds pooled. A situation where a public individual, a civil servant is contributing, okay, and other persons are not contributing, it creates a limitation to what that singular individual contributing can access. Because NHIS works on a pooled fund.
Isn't that why we have universal health coverage? Isn't that supposed to cover all of those?
That's what it is. Now, the situation where you have paucity of funds and the contributions are not big enough, you cannot offer certain medications to people because you cannot fund it. But if you have, except if you're going to go a lot higher in what an individual contributes, and that will make it very difficult for an average person too. Now, because of the smaller funds being contributed on the belief that generality of people will contribute, and they are not, it now makes it difficult for the few that are contributing to access quality healthcare, except you step up what they are contributing. Because healthcare is a very costly venture. We all know. In other parts of the world where we go to, we know how much we spend on them. So the issue now is, we need to go back to the drawing board. First and foremost, it's been made compulsory. We need to make sure that every individual is contributing, public, private, whichever area you find yourself. Secondly, we need to now, with those making it compulsory now, we need to now state what is obtainable with the health insurance package. Good enough to take care of the basic problems we have. Because 90% of the health problems we have in Nigeria are still very basic. Infections, common illnesses, non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, and these things are not rocket science. Okay, we're not having so much of genetic problems, metabolic diseases, severe things that require extensive surgeries. Yes, they are there, but they are in the minority. So if we have that compulsory nature being implemented, that everybody is contributing, we'll be able to have a pool of funds with which you can now expand the scope of what the health insurance is offering. Now, it's not every hospital that is offering as under the health insurance package. Not every hospital is registered. So if you're going to a hospital that is not registered to access health care, of course, they'll ask you for an out-of-pocket expense. But you must register with the hospital that is offering health insurance service under the so-called HMOs. Okay, and when that is done, then you can access that. But the amount of funds that is available is what is limiting the scope and even the level of medications that are given. And that is what is undermining the health insurance package as we have as a country, particularly as a state. And it can be improved upon.
If that is the case, for children, but you've made mention, is World Pneumonia Day, and how do we begin? Like I keep saying, I'm interested in proactive, prevention, preventative, whatever you choose to call it, to make sure that we don't get to the point where we are now battling to
treat and run the risk of death. Thank you very much. Now, from the beginning, from birth, okay, the first and foremost and the most important thing for a child is the breast milk. The breast milk has everything that the child needs to be able to fight most of infections that come around them. But you realize that in our part of the world, our exclusive breastfeeding rates are still very low. I'm talking about percentages in the 20s, 27, 29, at best 31%. Okay. Meanwhile, neighboring African countries are talking about 63, 70% exclusive breastfeeding rate. a good number of our mothers are still giving glucose water, a newborn baby. They are still giving the child coconut water. They quickly run to our breast milk substitutes. Okay? Now, anything that you give outside the recommendation of a trained health worker to a newborn baby outside breast milk negates exclusive breastfeeding. That means that if medications are prescribed by a qualified health worker for a baby as a result of an illness the baby has, it doesn't negate exclusive breastfeeding. Because no qualified health worker will give a baby glucose water or coconut water or any of the other concoctions that will give to our babies. A child will rather receive breast milk only. That is the WHO recommendation. Breast milk only till the child is 6 months, and thereafter breast milk with appropriate complementary feeds till the child is at least 2 years. Most mothers don't. A little study I did in ParkLane where I work showed that less than 1% of our mothers breastfeed their babies beyond 18 months. So many of them will stop. Over 99% of our mothers would have stopped breastfeeding as at 18 months. No, WHO says at least 2 years. Not even 2 years, but at least 2 years. So now when we come to the first 6 months of life, when the breast milk is absolute, only breast milk for the first 6 months, no water. A lot of our mothers fall short of that. Some of our mother-in-laws and grannies will say, oh, is there any human being that doesn't take water? They forget that 88 to 87, 88% of the breast milk itself is already water. So that newborn baby doesn't need any additional water from any other source. One is that water you are bringing externally could also have some organisms that can make that child to come down with diarrhea diseases and what have you. Secondly is that you don't need to prepare anything. The breast milk comes natural. It is endowed. It has all that the child needs. It creates bonding. You spend less, even in diaper. And so many other advantages of exclusive breastfeeding. Okay? So apart from breastfeeding, which we've talked about, next is the vaccines. We still have a percentage of our children that are unimmunized. Some are living in areas that are hard to reach. Some are finding it difficult to access even the nearest primary health care center for vaccination. Some are living in a world of myths. Oh, vaccine will cause this, cause that. Those are commoner in the north, but it's still an issue. Okay, and all these things are robbing some of our children of vaccines that can prevent what? Diseases. And some of these vaccines are targeted towards organisms that cause pneumonia. One is the BCG that is given at birth. BCG is against tuberculosis, which is what? Which is an atypical type of pneumonia. Okay, so BCG prevents against severe forms of what? Tuberculosis. Then you talk about our Bordetella pertussis, part of what we find in the Penta. Okay, the Penta vaccine has what? Pertussis in it. It has the Haemophilus influenza type B. These are organisms that are very common against what? Organisms that cause pneumonia. They'll talk about strep pneumonia, which we have in the PCV, the pneumococcal vaccine. The pneumococcal vaccine has those strep pneumonia, H. influenza type B are the two most common bacteria that cause pneumonia in our children. Okay, they will now talk about other vaccines like the measles vaccine. People think that measles is only the rash and then the cough and catarrh. Measles also has a complication of what? A pneumonia, what we call the measles pneumonia. Okay, and pneumonia from measles can be quite devastating, can also lead to death. So all these vaccines that are there, they are known and they are proven to help reduce the what? The morbidity, the incidence, occurrence in the first place. And then even the severe forms of those diseases even when they occur. And worldwide, vaccines remain the single most important intervention that has given the most yield in the world in terms of reducing morbidity and mortality from vaccine-preventable illnesses. Then having talked about breastfeeding and vaccines, we'll now look at overcrowding. We're talking about housing now. Okay? So you see the intersectoral nature of health. So health cannot exist in isolation. So the housing ministry has to come up with something. How do we have low-cost housings, even in our villages, that people can afford pay over time? Housing mustn't be just for civil servants alone. Okay, we should be able to diversify that, get something cheap and affordable, using locally available materials to provide adequate housing. So when we work on overcrowding, we look at nutrition generally. Okay, our percentage malnutrition in Nigeria has moved from 17 to 21% to close to 40% as we speak. In the children emergency room where I work, almost 2 out of every 5 children that walk into the emergency room are malnourished. So that they are severely malnourished, acute malnutrition, or chronic malnutrition, or they have what we call hidden hunger, which is the micronutrient deficiency. So malnutrition is on the increase with the poor economic indices, okay, and all the challenges we have as a nation. And with malnutrition, our body's immune system is depleted, giving room for all these organisms to find our bodies conducive for them to come into and begin to cause diseases, particularly diseases like the TB we are talking about. So, again, you look at the fumes. A lot of our mothers still use charcoal, still use firewood to cook. The idea is that, it is cheap, it's affordable.
Is it not?
Rather than using clean energy.
Clean energy.
Yes, talk about clean LPG, our gas. Talk about using our solar sources of energy, electricity. Yes, they say that they are costly, but we run the risk because those fumes also expose these children to what? Having pneumonia.
I hear you, Dr. Nduagubam. But then, feasibility, realistically, can these be... I started with telling you of how our business news report is showing that groundnut vegetable oil, as it's called, it's moved, and all because there's also an increase in fair pump price, 1,003 to 1,006, and that's, like you said, doesn't exist in isolation. So it's affecting every sector of it.
Definitely.
Now you're asking some mothers who are in the village and struggling. Remember, they can't go to farm anymore because there's crisis as well. So to go buy cylinder at what cost? And realistically, what can we do to, if not reduce drastically, but minimally, to all around this? Because one is understanding that, this is what's happening to my child, and I think at this point I need to take the child to the doctors or to the hospital. I think this is a sign that the child is having pneumonia, and all of that.
Well, the best, if you ask me, is that some of these things are made affordable, which is eluding us now. We all agree. Fuel has moved from about something to 800 to 1, 2, and thereabout. So it's becoming more and more, away from the reach of the common man. In fact, even the rich are also complaining. Okay, talk more of those in the rural environment. Well, the least I can advise is that if you can't move away from charcoal and firewood for cooking, at least let it not be within the home. Secondly, some of our mothers are fond of carrying their children as they walk in the kitchen. The child is crying. There is nobody to help to carry the child. So they find themselves in the kitchen with the smoke, with the child. Okay, so as much as possible, let the kitchen be away, detached from the home. That will also help. And then let that child not be with them in that environment where they are cooking. That may also help a little. But it doesn't solve all the problem. Because we know what happens to smoke. Smoke also attaches to your body, your clothes. And when you carry the baby afterwards, you also run similar or near similar challenge. So the situation is difficult, it's challenging, but it's good that they know, because a bunch of the people that we're talking about is not only the factor of not being able to afford, that is the issue, there is also the ignorance factor, the knowledge deficit.
That's the gap I wanted us to touch on before we wrap up. What would a mother, or brothers in this case, family, mothers would live, would see and begin to think that their brother, the sister, or the child has pneumonia?
Thank you very much. That's the main reason. That's one of the reasons why PAN is here, Paediatric Association of Nigeria, for which I'm the coordinator for Enugu. The World Pneumonia Day is about awareness creation, and this is part of the awareness, major things we want to create. Okay, and the theme for this year is every breath counts, stop pneumonia in its tracks. Okay, so those risk factors, or those things that you see that are common, one is the fever, which people would now take every fever to be malaria or any other thing else. They start giving paracetamol, they are washing the back of the cup, the inside is dirty, they're not tackling the cause of the fever. Okay, and then along with that fever is the cough. Okay, as well as fast or difficult breathing. So when you have fever cough, fast or difficult breathing, that child may have a pneumonia. Okay, and like we always say, once a child is not well, you don't need to start playing, gallivanting, going around picking drugs here and there, trying to treat what the person treating you doesn't even know what it is. The idea is that we must develop that habit of what? Good and early health-seeking behavior. A child that is ill will go to the hospital. We have our PHCs next to us. We have our general hospitals before the tertiary. A good number of people will want to go straight to tertiary hospital. I understand the reasons. Facilities, technical know-how, and what have you. Okay? But the PHCs should be there to also guide us as well. So the risk factors, so the fever, the cough, the fast breathing, and then the fact that people present early, where they will be listening to, they will be examined, they will listen to their chest, and they will be able to know whether the child has pneumonia or not. It might as well even be TB.
Thank you so much, and I hope we could have this conversation over and again in Igbo, in English anyway, to pass the information. Thanks, Dr.
Thank you for having
joining us, and thanks to Judo Wood, the producer. Joe Bitilata has been supervisor, and the executive producer is Ikechu Kweze. My name is Ekene Odiwe. Bridget Okoye will be taking us on the news in just a moment. Stay with us.